During the reign of King Henry VIII, a large number of people were executed for a number of different reasons. Henry is best remembered for his 6 wives, with 2 of them meeting a bloody end at the sharp blade of an axe. But there were many more people who suffered in England, especially as the king made huge changes to the church. Today we look at a group of monks who refused to support Henry's oath of supremacy, in which the king was declared supreme head of the church. For this, they paid the ultimate price. So join us today as we look at the brutal execution of the Carthusian monks. Remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. During 1535 to 1540, there were a total of 18 Carthusian monks who were executed and put to death by Henry VIII. Each of these refused to support the king's supremacy as the supreme head of the Church of England. Carthusian monks are an enclosed Catholic religious order which includes monks and nuns. In Britain, there were 10 Carthusian monasteries before the Reformation, with the first being founded by Henry II in 1181. The monasteries usually consisted of small communities of hermits, with the focus of life being contemplation, solitude and silence. They are incredibly strong in their Catholic devotion, and each monk or hermit has their own living space in a small dwelling. They lived very quiet lives devoted to prayer, and it would have been a very quiet and tranquil life devoted to religious contemplation and study. There are still a number of Carthusian monasteries in the world today, but during the English Reformation, the monarchy sought about attacking these monastic buildings and the way of lives of the monks. A document regarding the Charterhouse monks reads how 18 of the Charterhouse were condemned for defending the liberty of the church. They all died in very different and brutal ways, for refusing to accept the king as the head of the church. This point was an area of contention for many Catholics in England when Henry VIII declared his supremacy, as for centuries they had believed in papal supremacy and regarded the Pope as the head of the church. All of these 18 men were men of God and were known for their tranquil and peaceful solitude and worship, and their execution was a huge sign of the king's brutality. What we will now do is look at the different executions that took place. On the 4th of May 1535, John Houghton, the Prior of the London Charterhouse, Robert Lawrence, Prior of the Beauvale Charterhouse, and Augustine Webster, the Prior of the Axholme House, were all executed, along with another monk of Sion Abbey, Richard Reynolds. The community of the Carthusians was ordered to make the new oath accepting Henry's supremacy, and these particular members pleaded with Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister, to be exempt. Immediately they were thrown into prison, and a special commission was brought forward to try the monks, with all of them being sentenced to death. All of them were hanged, drawn and quartered. The 3 priors were taken to Tyburn in their monks' habits and robes, and they were dragged to their execution on hurdles. Their exit was seen by Thomas More, who saw them from his prison cell at the Tower of London. John Houghton was the first to be executed, and after he was hanged, he was taken down alive, and then the processing of quartering Houghton began. After this, his body was chopped up and hung in different parts of London to act as a reminder of the king's power. A month later, on the 19th of June 1535, a number of other members of the London Charterhouse suffered the same fate. Sebastian Newdegate, William Exmew and Humphrey Middlemore were all hanged, drawn and quartered at Tyburn. Sebastian Newdegate himself was close to the king and acted as a former Privy Councillor. He did sign the oath of succession, but would not accept his friend's supremacy. Because of this, he was arrested and taken to Marshalsea Prison and was brutally held in chains in an upright position, secured to a pillar for 2 weeks. This was an attempt to break him, but he continued to refuse. King Henry VIII himself even visited Newdegate at the Tower of London to convince him to accept his supremacy, but he continued to refuse, and for this he was executed. All of the 3 monks killed on the 19th of June 1535 were taken to Tyburn on hurdles and suffered exactly the same fate as the earlier members of the house did. 2 years later, in May 1537, Henry VIII would claim more victims of the Carthusian order. John Rochester and James Walworth from the London Charterhouse were hanged in chains from the battlements of York. They had both been opposed to the king's changes and were taken to York to stand trial against treason charges. They were both condemned to death before they were hung in chains from the city's walls. Allegedly, after a while, their bodies fell into pieces. The statement made in York was a direct opposition to the Pilgrimage of Grace and was an attempt to bring the city into line. 1537 would be in particular a brutal year for the Carthusian monks, with more executions and deaths taking place that year. In June 1537, William Greenwood, the lay brother of the London Charterhouse again, would die from starvation. He had been held at Newgate Prison in brutal conditions and had been starved in an attempt to get him to conform to the king's wishes. John Davy, a deacon and monk also at the same Charterhouse, met the same fate at Newgate, as did Robert Salt. Within 4 days, 3 of the Carthusian monks had died from starvation, having been kept in horrific conditions. On the 10th of June 1537, the king would claim another couple of victims of starvation at Newgate, with Thomas Green and Walter Pearson dying in captivity. This continued as Thomas Scriven and Thomas Reddinge both met their same fate in June 1537. In August 1537, Richard Beer, a choir monk, died in the same vein, as did Thomas Johnson. Johnson had been arrested for refusing to sign the oath and was kept in Newgate for a long time. It's believed that he survived for so long because he had food smuggled in for him. There would be one more member of the London Charterhouse who was executed on the orders of Henry VIII. William Horne was taken to Tyburn and suffered the same fate as the earlier monks, being hanged, disemboweled and quartered in front of a large crowd. For some reason he had been kept alive, but was executed with a number of other Catholics that day. The Carthusian martyrs of London suffered heavily at the hands of King Henry VIII. The monastery had been completely emptied, and following the dissolution of the monastic building, the London Charterhouse was used as a mansion. They before Henry VIII's reign had been held in high regard, but their refusal to support the king's supremacy was seen as a direct opposition to the king, and Henry believed that they needed bringing into line. The story of the Carthusian monks of London shows how savage Henry could be, and also how he would do absolutely anything to secure his power. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.